The first snow of November had just graced Chicago, casting a serene, white blanket over the city. I was walking home from my evening class at my university, the crisp air filled with the promise of winter. The streets were quieter than usual, the snow dampening the usual city bustle. As I crossed the Michigan Avenue Bridge, the Chicago River below me was partially frozen, reflecting the city lights in a fragmented dance. That's when I noticed something unusual. A car parked on the bridge, hazard lights blinking weakly through the falling snow. It was an old, rusted sedan, out of place amidst the city's usual traffic. My curiosity piqued, and I approached the car. The driver's side door was ajar, and there was no sign of the driver. I peered inside, finding the keys still in the ignition and the engine running. The warmth from the heater fought against the cold air that rushed in. "Hello?" I called out, but there was no response. I glanced around, but the bridge was deserted, except for the occasional passing car that seemed to ignore the odd scene. I decided to step out onto the bridge to look around. That's when I saw footprints in the snow, leading away from the car towards the river's edge. They were fresh, the snow still settling in them. I followed, a sense of unease growing with each step. The footprints led to the railing of the bridge. Beyond that, nothing. Just the dark, icy waters below. My heart raced as I realized the implications. Had someone just jumped? I was about to turn back and call the police when I heard a faint sound. It was a cough, weak and strained, coming from below the bridge. I rushed to the railing, peering over the edge, and that's when I saw him. A man, clinging to a support beam, his face pale and contorted in pain. "Hold on," I shouted. "I'm going to get help." I fumbled with my phone, my fingers numb from the cold, and dialed 911. I explained the situation, my voice trembling. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way and instructed me to stay put. As I waited, I kept talking to the man, trying to keep him conscious. He was barely responsive, his words slurred and incoherent. I just couldn't understand how he had ended up in such a perilous position. The minutes went by, each one felt like an eternity. The snow kept falling, covering the city in a deceptive calm. Finally, I heard the sirens. The Chicago Fire Department had arrived, swiftly deploying their equipment. They worked with practiced efficiency, lowering a rescuer down to the man. I watched, holding my breath, as they secured him in a harness and carefully hoisted him up. The man was unconscious now, his body limp. The paramedics rushed to his side, administering first aid. The police arrived shortly after, and I gave them my statement. They told me the man was lucky to be alive and that my call had probably saved his life. They asked if I knew him, but he was just a stranger to me. I lingered on the bridge long after the emergency vehicles had left, the snowfall seeming to cleanse the air of the night's drama. The man's car was towed away, and the bridge returned to its quiet, usual state. As I finally resumed my walk home, I couldn't shake the image of the man clinging to the bridge. What had driven him to such despair? Was it a moment of impulse or a planned act? I realized I would probably never know. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the fragile nature of life and how quickly things can change. The snow continued to fall outside, a silent witness to the hidden struggles of the city. It was a late November evening, and I found myself driving on the New Jersey Turnpike, heading north from New Brunswick, back into Midtown Manhattan. The night was unusually dark, the moon obscured by thick clouds, and the only light came from my car's headlights and the occasional street lights. I was returning from a business trip, the meeting having run late into the evening. The turnpike was almost deserted, which wasn't surprising given the hour. I welcomed the solitude, the steady hum of the engine, and the rhythmic passing of the white lane markers were almost meditative. As I approached the halfway point in my journey, around exit 13, I noticed a car on the side of the road. It was an older model sedan, hazard lights blinking feebly. Normally, I wouldn't stop. It's not safe, especially at night. But something about the scene made me slow down. There was a figure standing next to the car, seemingly looking under the hood. I pulled over a safe distance from the car and got out, my breath visible in the cold November air. "Need any help?" I called out as I approached. The figure straightened up and turned towards me. It was a woman, probably in her 30s, her face etched with worry. "I don't know what's wrong with it," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "It just died on me." Now, I'm no mechanic, but I know my way around a car, so I offered to take a look. She watched anxiously as I examined the engine. It didn't take long for me to realize that this wasn't something fixable on the side of the highway. "You need a tow," I said. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I was afraid of that. My phone's dead, and I've been here for over an hour, hoping someone would stop." I offered to call a tow truck for her and let her wait in my car where it was warm. She hesitated at first, but then agreed, thanking me profusely. As we sat in my car, waiting for the tow truck, we started chatting. Her name was Sarah, and she was heading home from visiting family. She talked about her job as a teacher, her love for books, and her cat named Whiskers. The conversation was pleasant, a welcome distraction from the cold and the wait. After about 20 minutes, the tow truck arrived. Sarah collected her things and thanked me again. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped," she said, her eyes sincere. I watched as her car loaded up, making sure she was safely on her way before I got back into my car and continued my journey. The rest of the drive was uneventful, but my mind kept drifting back to Sarah. It felt good to have helped someone, a small beacon of light on a dark, lonely road. I reached exit 16, which was the Lincoln Tunnel, and merged off the turnpike, the city lights of New York welcoming me back. As I drove through the streets, I thought about how quickly life can change. One moment you're on a routine drive, the next you're helping a stranger in the night. I got home late, the apartment quiet and dark. As I lay in bed, I couldn't help but think about the randomness of encounters. What if I had driven past Sarah? What if she had never broken down? Life is a series of chance happenings, and sometimes those chances lead to unexpected connections. The next morning, I woke up to the news reporting an accident on the turnpike, not far from where I had helped Sarah. A sense of unease settled over me as I listened to the details. A multi-car pileup, several injured. It had happened not long after I had passed through. I thought about how fragile life is, how a simple decision like stopping to help someone can have a ripple effect. If I hadn't stopped for Sarah, I might have been involved in that accident. As I went about on my day, I couldn't shake the feeling of how closely our lives are intertwined with those of strangers. We pass by hundreds of people every day, unaware of their stories, their struggles, or how our paths may cross in significant ways. That night on the turnpike, a simple act of kindness had connected me to a stranger, and perhaps in some small way, it had altered the course of our lives. It was a reminder that every choice we make, no matter how small, can have far-reaching consequences. It was a chilly November evening in our small town, and my parents had just left for a weekend trip, giving me the house to myself. I was 15, and this was the first time they had trusted me to stay alone. Excited for the freedom, I invited my best friend, Alex, for a sleepover. We had planned a night of movies, video games, and pizza. The perfect way to spend a weekend. Alex arrived at around 7 p.m., armed with a stack of horror movies and a grin. Ready to be scared? He joked, knowing full well that both of us were horror buffs, hardly fazed by scary movies anymore. We set up in the living room, dimming the lights and firing up the first movie. Halfway through, we were interrupted by a faint scratching sound. It was coming from the back of the house, near the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. "Did you hear that?" Alex asked, pausing the movie. "Yeah," I replied, a bit unnerved. We both got up and tiptoed to the kitchen, which had a clear view of the sliding door. The curtains were drawn, but the faint sound continued, like someone trying to pry the door open. "Shall we call the cops?" Alex whispered. I shook my head. "Let's check it out first. It might just be a raccoon or something." We crept closer, hearts pounding. As we neared the door, the scratching stopped, replaced by a soft, methodical clicking, like someone picking a lock. And then we saw it. It was a man dressed in all black, trying to break in. Fear gripped me, but then a crazy idea popped into my head. "Let's scare him off," I whispered to Alex. "We'll leave the back door unlocked. He'll think he's got an easy break-in, but we'll be waiting." Alex's eyes lit up with a mix of fear and excitement. "Are you sure? What if he's dangerous?" "We'll arm ourselves, just in case," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. We quietly unlocked the back door and then grabbed a couple of baseball bats from the garage. We positioned ourselves behind the wall adjacent to the door, hearts racing. Minutes passed and then we heard it. The back door slowly creaking open. Footsteps entered cautiously. I peeked around the corner and saw a figure cloaked in black, a ski mask covering his face. He stepped further into the house, unaware of our presence. I nodded at Alex, and then we sprang into action. I swung my bat, hitting the intruder on the back. He stumbled forward, caught off guard. Alex followed up with a swift karate kick, a skill he'd been perfecting for years. The intruder fell to the ground, knocked out cold. We were both shaking, a mix of adrenaline and fear coursing through us. "We did it," Alex gasped, disbelief in his voice. I quickly called 911, explaining the situation. Within minutes, police cars arrived, the lights piercing through the dark night. The officers handcuffed the intruder and began asking us questions. We explained everything, from the scratching sounds to our impromptu plan. The police were impressed but also concerned. "You boys are lucky. This could have ended very badly," one officer said sternly. "Next time, call us immediately." They contacted my parents, who were shocked but relieved that we were safe. One officer stayed outside until my parents arrived home early next morning. The intruder turned out to be a local thief known to the police. He had been targeting empty houses in the area, and ours seemed like an easy target. After the whole ordeal, Alex and I talked about what had happened, our voices still trembling. We had faced danger and came out unscathed. However, the reality of the situation was just slowly sinking in. We were just kids, and we had just taken a huge risk. The next day, my parents tightened the home security, installing new locks and an alarm system. They praised our bravery, but made us promise to never take such a risk again. As for Alex and I, we learned a valuable lesson about safety and the importance of making smart decisions. We still talk about that night, the night we outsmarted an intruder, but we also remember the fear and the realization that our little adventure could have turned out very, very differently. From then on, our sleepovers were a lot less eventful, and we were perfectly fine with that.